For our first book of the year, we are going to be reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and this is written by C.S. Lewis. So we're going to go ahead and get started today with Chapter 1. Chapter 1, Lucy Looks into a Wardrobe. Once, there were 4 children, whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of the air raids. They were sent to the house of an old professor who lived in the heart of the country, 10 miles from the nearest railroad station and 2 miles from the nearest post office. He had no wife, and he lived in a very large house with a housekeeper named Mrs. Macready and 3 servants. Their names were Ivy, Margaret, and Betty, but they do not come into this story much. He himself was a very old man with shaggy white hair which grew over most of his face as well as on his head. And they liked him almost at once. But the first evening when he came out to meet them at the front door, he was so odd-looking that Lucy, who was the youngest, was afraid of him. And Edmund, who was the next youngest, wanted to laugh and had to keep on pretending he was blowing his nose to hide it. As soon as they said goodnight to the professor and went upstairs on the first night, the boys came into the girls' room and they all talked it over. "We've fallen on our feet, and no mistake," said Peter. "This is going to be perfectly splendid. That old chap is going to let us do anything we want." "I think he's an old dear," said Susan. "Oh, come off it," said Edmund, who tried and pretended not to be tired, which always made him really bad-tempered. "Don't go talking like that." "Like what?" said Susan. "And anyways, it's time that you were in bed." "Trying to talk like mother," said Edmund. "And who are you to say when I'm going to bed? You need to go to bed yourself." "Hadn't we all just better go to bed?" said Lucy. "There's sure to be a row if we heard talking in here." "No, there won't," said Peter. "I tell you, this is the sort of house where no one's going to mind what we do anyways. They won't hear us. It's about a 10-minute walk from here down to that dining room, and the amount of stairs and passages in between, they won't hear us if we stay up." "What's that noise?" said Lucy. A far larger house than she'd ever been in before, and she thought of all those long passages and rows of doors leading into the empty rooms, and it was beginning to make her feel a little creeped out. "It's only a bird, silly," said Edmund. "It's an owl," said Peter. "This is going to be a wonderful place for birds. I think I'll go to bed now. I say let's go explore tomorrow. You might find anything in a place like this. Did you see those mountains as we came in the woods? There might be eagles. There might be stags. There might be hawks." "Badgers," said Lucy. "Foxes," said Edmund. "Rabbits," said Susan. But when the next morning came, there was a steady rain falling, so thick that when you looked out the window, you could neither see the mountains, nor the woods, nor the stream in the garden. "Of course it would be raining," said Edmund. They'd just finished their breakfast with the professor, and they were upstairs in their room that he had set apart for them. A long, low room with 2 windows looking out in the direction and 2 in another. "Do stop grumbling, Ed," said Susan. 10 to 1 it'll clear up in an hour or so, and in the meantime, we're pretty well off. There's a wireless and a lot of books." "Not for me," said Peter. "I'm going to go explore in the house." Everyone agreed to this, and that's how the adventure began. It was the sort of house that you never seemed to come to the end of, and it was very full of unexpected places. The first few doors that they tried led only into spare bedrooms, as everyone had expected they would. But soon they came to a very long room full of pictures, and they found a suit of armor. And after that, there was a room all hung with green, with a harp in the corner. And then came 3 steps down and 5 steps up, and a little upstairs hall with a door that led onto a balcony. And then the whole series of rooms that led into each other were lined with books. Most of them were very old books, and some bigger than a Bible in a church. And shortly after, they looked into the room, and it was empty except for one big wardrobe. The sort that has a looking glass in the door. There was nothing else in the room except a dead blue bottle on the windowsill. "Nothing there," said Peter, and they all trotted out again, all except for Lucy. She stayed behind because she thought it would be worthwhile trying to open the door of the wardrobe, even though she felt almost sure that it would be locked.